Did you know the sharpest weapon in Gilead isn't a gun, it's a birth record? Outsiders see faith, order, and ceremony. June Osborne sees one thing, a daughter who must be brought home. That's why love turns into leverage, prayer into policy, and a woman's body into the battlefield. Let's chart the story's evolution across its 6-season landscape, every ritual, every rebellion, every rescue, wrapped up in 22 minutes. Season 1 starts in a near-future United States, where fertility has collapsed, and the sons of Jacob seize Washington in a coup. They rename the country Gilead and reorder life by color and class. Wives in teal run households beside commanders, Marthas labor in kitchens, ants train girls behind high walls, and fertile women, handmaids in red, are assigned to commanders to bear children through a ritual everyone pretends is holy. June Osborne, once an editor with a husband, Luke, and a daughter, Hannah, is captured at the border as her family tries to flee. She's torn from Hannah, told Luke is dead, and shipped to the Red Center, where Aunt Lydia breaks women with scripture, cattle prods, and public shaming. There, June reconnects with her best friend Moira, who will bolt twice, once failing with June, once finally succeeding, because some people will not be domesticated. June is assigned to Commander Fred Waterford and his wife, Serena Joy. In Gilead, your name disappears, you become property. Offered literally means of Fred. Offered is not technically a name, but the slave name of a woman given to a man, literally of Fred, in Margaret Atwood's dystopian novel, The Handmaid's Tale. At first, she survives by shrinking herself. Yes, Aunt Lydia, blessed day, eyes down. She watches other women, Janine or Ovwarren, Emily or Ovglin, get crushed in different ways. Janine births a miracle baby and is instantly discarded back to Red. When she later breaks, steals her own infant, and stands on a bridge, June coaxes her down, and Gilead turns it into a stoning practice run. Emily is exposed as a lesbian, undergoes mutilation, and keeps breathing anyway. The brutality is precise, individualized shame delivered as public theater. Inside the Waterford home, a second theater runs. Serena, once a public ideologue of this theocracy, now lives with the fine print she helped write, no reading, no voice, and takes her rage out in quiet punishments. Fred is cordial, cultured, and perfectly capable of driving June at night to Jezebel's, an illegal brothel for the elite, to pretend that all this is normal. There, June finds Moira alive. The place is a grotesque safety valve. Sin for commanders, silence for victims, plausible deniability for everyone. June learns that an underground resistance exists, Mayday, and that Luke is not dead but in Canada. When Serena grows impatient for a pregnancy and suspects her husband is the problem, she arranges a ceremonial workaround with the household driver, Nick. It's coercion packaged as strategy. It doesn't make the child any less conceived in love. June does become pregnant, and the baby will one day be called Nicole. A foreign trade delegation visits. June tries to plead for help and discovers the dirty truth. Gilead's only export that really matters is babies. Women are currency. The mask slips again when Serena parades June past Hannah from a distance. Proof of leverage, never a reunion. Meanwhile, Emily is caught as Mayday, and Janine's forced stoning is staged. In the circle, June refuses to throw the rock. Others follow. That tiny public no changes the oxygen in the room. By the finale, everything that's been building, June's pregnancy, Serena's paranoia, Fred's vice, Nick's double role as an eye, state spy, and a man in love, everything collapses. Black vans arrive. Guardians march June out. Nick leans in and says what nobody says here, "Trust me." The doors slam. Before we get into the next season, if you want more long-form, no-fluff TV story breakdowns like this, hit subscribe. In Season 2, the van doesn't take June to a quick execution. Gilead prefers terror that leaves you breathing. The rebellious handmaids are herded to a stadium, nooses around their necks, and hanged on dead gallows. It's a panic rehearsal. The drop never comes. Lesson delivered. Obedience reinstalled, at least for the cameras. June's pregnancy turns her into contested property. At a clinic, a sympathetic doctor slips her a key and a route out. She sheds the red cloak, hides in an empty newspaper office, and links with Nick long enough to attempt an airstrip escape. It fails. The state spins it into a kidnapping and a heroic rescue. She's dragged back to the Waterfords and the tight focus of Serena's anger. When June faints and nearly loses the baby, even hospital care becomes a stage for control. June's body is theirs when convenient, hers only to suffer. This season opens the map. Nick is rewarded with a young wife, Eden, for loyalty. He's in love with June and trapped by ritual. Moira makes it to Canada and lands in Luke's world, where grief meets bureaucracy, survivors, caseworkers, lists of missing. Emily cycles through a toxic work colony, punishment masked as labor, and boomerangs back to the city because even Gilead can't waste fertile bodies after a suicide bombing at the New Red Center kills handmaids and injures commanders, Fred included. We meet Commander Joseph Lawrence, the architect of Gilead's economy, and a man who looks at the system he built with a mix of scorn and resignation. He's an eccentric who plays violent music in a quiet house and says dangerous truths softly, a foreshadowing of how he'll matter later. As Serena tastes power, editing Fred's orders while he recovers, then being punished for it, her arc sharpens. She wants a baby, a status, a future she can live with. She will first try to bend the rules, then break, then brutalize, then splinter. When the baby, Nicole, is born, the series refuses the easy rescue. June labors alone in an empty mansion during a failed escape, names her daughter, and watches the child get lifted away by the same country that says this is God's will. What shatters Serena's certainty isn't June's defiance, but watching Gilead crush girls efficiently. She gathers wives to request that little girls be allowed to read the Bible, the book they'll be judged by. For this, her finger is cut off. Order maintained, message received. Lawrence becomes a hinge. Emily, reaching the end of her endurance, stabs Aunt Lydia and is bundled by Lawrence into a car instead of a death sentence. The Martha Network, quiet housekeepers with long memories, moves like a capillary system through the city. As a clandestine convoy forms to smuggle a baby to freedom, June makes the hardest choice. She puts Nicole into Emily's arms and stays behind to fight for Hannah. It's not a failure of motherhood, it's the precise shape of it. On the tarmac to Canada, Emily steps into the wind with a child who will never remember the ritual she was born from. Behind them, June turns back toward a house that will punish her for trying to leave. In Season 3, the City of Masks starts to crack. June is reassigned to Commander Lawrence's home, where the rules are opaque and the man in charge hates ceremonies, small talk, and his own legacy. June wants Hannah, Lawrence wants leverage. Serena wants a story where she isn't the villain. Fred wants Serena to stand beside him and applaud. Nick is promoted and sent toward a war front we rarely see, but always feel. Serena burns down her house, flirts with repentance, then slides back into self-preservation. She and Fred strike a deal with American agent Mark Tuello, share Gilead secrets, get a path to Nicole. In reality, Serena intends to turn Fred in, claim victimhood, and land softly in Canada with visiting rights. Fred, arrested at the border, answers by telling the truth that still damns her. Serena ordered Nick to sleep with June. The myth of Serena as a pure wife evaporates. She is a participant, not an innocent, and the law will treat her as such. Meanwhile, June learns how far the Martha Network reaches. The plan emerges. Get dozens of children out by air using a bartender smuggler and Lawrence's access. It's an operation with a cost. June's leadership turns sharper and harder. She chooses 5 Marthas to save and condemns the rest to the colonies because those are the only seats she can get. She starts to look like the system she's fighting, triage turned moral weather. In one of the series' most brutal hours, a devout handmaid of Matthew, Natalie, is pushed past endurance by social policing and Aunt Lydia's classroom cruelty. She breaks into a supermarket, a gun in her hand, then lies vegetative in a hospital while her pregnancy is harvested. June's earlier pettiness toward her turns into a month-long vigil that screams the season's thesis. Trauma isn't a sermon, it's a trap, and the only way out is together. Commander Winslow, a powerful patron, tries to assault June at Jezebel's. She kills him with a pen and a metal statue, and the Marthas clean the scene with the competence of women who've cleaned up after men forever. Crimes here vanish if the right people nod. The plane night arrives. The network produces more children than planned. The house fills, shoes are tied, Names are whispered. Boxes of snacks appear from nowhere. Lawrence freezes, trapped between the machine he helped assemble and the people he's finally decided to save. The plane roars down a makeshift runway and lifts into black sky. Canada wakes to screaming sirens and a cargo hold full of sleeping children. June buys that takeoff with blood. Guardians fire. She draws them off. Bullets find her. Handmaids hoist her on a door through the trees like pallbearers for the living. In Canada, Moira and Luke meet a child whose birth mother is now a face on a Gilead wanted board. Back in Boston, Serena's plan has backfired. Fred is in cuffs, and June has discovered that leadership is a ledger. Every life she shepherds out puts another target on her back. The fourth season splits the story across a border that now feels like a fault line. In Gilead, June and a small band of fugitives find refuge on a farm run by Esther Keyes, a teenager married off to a predator and already plotting his slow demise with poison. June tries to transform anger into organization. Esther tries to turn her trauma into a weapon. Nick surfaces as the guardian who still loves June and the officer who still serves the state. He buys her small breaths of time, then has to become the man who chases her again. Capture, black bags, basement torture. The switch that breaks June is Hannah, her daughter dragged into the room, terrified, not recognizing her. June gives up the location of her friends to stop that fear from finding a body. It's not betrayal, it's a mother yanking the fire away from a child. The state swings anyway. The handmaids are marched as chattel down a road and in one shattering sequence gunned down during an escape. Only June and Janine survive, hiding in a milk tanker that clatters toward Chicago, where the war is loud. On the other side of the lake, Serena and Fred are in Canadian custody. Serena is pregnant, a headline and a cudgel, and she tries to recruit Rita, the Waterford's former Martha, to testify that Serena is misunderstood. Rita has found her name again and refuses. In Toronto, survivors meet in circles that look like healing and often feel like tearing open old wounds. June will later walk into one of those rooms, drop her mask, and say the quiet part out loud. We don't have to be nice. Chicago becomes the bridge back. Moira, now in a relationship and working with relief teams, finds June amid rubble after a bombing. There's a ship in harbor. Moira smuggles June aboard. The ship leaves without clearance because sometimes you fire the flare and worry about the paperwork later. Luke and June finally stand on the same shore again. She tells him what she did to survive and who Nicole's father is. He forgives what doesn't need forgiving. And then June chooses something as old as human memory. She and a circle of women trade a prisoner for a promise. Mark Tuello turns Fred over to Gilead for a group of resistance women scheduled to hang. The paperwork is clean, the outcome is not. Nick escorts Fred into no man's land and hands him to June and dozens of other survivors. They say nothing and run him down like prey in the dark, fists and boots and rocks, and leave a sign on the ground with his body. Nolit te bastardis carborandorum, which means don't let the bastards grind you down. When June returns home, blood still sticky on her, she kisses Nicole, tells Luke she'll be gone soon, and steps back out into a war she no longer intends to fight politely. In Season 5, the cult crosses the border. Fred's funeral in Gilead is pageantry designed for export, high church staging, a flag-draped coffin, Serena elevated as a grief Madonna. Broadcasts piped into Canadian plazas show Hannah, now in plum, the color that marks girls destined for wife school. The message is obvious: we still have your children and we're thriving. Serena returns to Toronto as Gilead's cultural emissary and opens a fertility center, funded by wealthy sympathizers like the Wheelers, who treat Serena as an honored guest until they don't. When her power dips, they recast her as something worse than a guest, something closer to a handmaid who is allowed to hold her own baby as long as she obeys. June and Luke cannot stop looking for Hannah. A Mayday contact in no man's land has intel, patrols swarm, they go anyway, they're grabbed. Luke is dumped back across the line, and June is loaded on a bus to be shipped to Gilead as a trophy. Serena, who has been playing at sovereignty in a borrowed house, sees an opening to reclaim agency. She ambushes the convoy, shoots her handler, and drags June into the woods at gunpoint. When labor strikes, enemies become midwives. June helps bring Noah into the world in a dirty barn because moral clarity will have to wait while a child is breathing. Canada turns colder. Anti-refugee sentiment spikes, protests flare. The Wheelers weaponize institutions to keep Serena and Noah under their thumb. Serena learns how quickly a benefactor becomes a jailer when a woman says no. She escapes a public opening, baby strapped to her chest, ducks a security cordon, and disappears into a night that will turn into a train. On the Gilead side, Commander Lawrence consolidates influence not by thumping a Bible, but by selling a plausible future. He pitches New Bethlehem, a controlled zone with softer edges, no executions, more leniency, repatriation for exiles who agree to rules. It's both a trap and reform, a way to sanitize Gilead for foreign eyes, and a space where incremental mercy might be real. Serena, oscillating between caution and ambition, listens. Nick, now a high-ranking officer with an arranged marriage, keeps walking his tightrope, a father who can't claim his child publicly, an eye who still loves the woman he was ordered to surveil. Assassins in Toronto try to run June down with a truck. Another man dies after Luke defends his wife. The law turns on them. The plan becomes geography. Get to the west, then maybe to Alaska, then away. At the station, as Luke realizes he must stay behind to let the train move, June and Nicole board a car already occupied by Serena and Noah. Two women who have traded power and pain for 5 seasons sit across from each other in the half-dark with their babies. All the pretty speeches are gone. Only choices remain. Then in Season 6, the story turns into a counter-revolution. The train never reaches Vancouver. That night, June yanks Serena out of a mob and saves a baby that isn't hers. By morning, the cars roll into Alaska, refugee barracks, 2-star flag, 5 minutes of phone time. In the clinic, an impossible reunion. Holly, June's mother, alive after the colonies, still doctoring the people who once caged her. Serena wakes in the woods, finds a church, and is taken in by a women-run commune called Canaan, everything Gilead pretends to be, without the men in charge. It can't last. Lawrence, now the mind behind New Bethlehem, tracks her down with a deal. Be the softened face of Gilead or lose Noah to the Wheelers. Serena chooses the pretty cage. Back east, Mayday stops whispering and starts biting. Luke and Moira run missions in no man's land. Tuello juggles dead drops with fewer allies every week. At mile marker 17, Nick and June trade a breathless hug for a plan, clear patrols, then extract Luke and Moira from a water park turned war zone. He does. 2 Guardians don't go home. Lawrence climbs to High Commander. New Bethlehem hosts diplomats while Serena sells the rebrand, kinder laws, fewer punishments, treaties on the table. Commander Gabriel Wharton, pious and polished, backs her, then proposes for the sake of stability. She says yes and steps into the same old role with nicer lighting. June and Moira slip into Jezebel's as Martha's to pull Janine and map guard shifts. Lawrence recognizes June and for once helps clean. 2 rebels in his trunk, no sermon. The counterpunch is brutal. Pushed by Wharton, Nick feeds intel that shuts Jezebel's for good. Guardians funnel the women into showers and execute them. Janine is pulled aside for placement. Mercy recast as ownership. June answers with a plan stitched into cloth. Aunt Phoebe at the Red Center moves quietly. Blades are sewn into new scarlet hems. Tuello supplies sedatives. Rita bakes Serena's wedding cake. Under chandeliers, Handmaid's pocket cake and napkins, while Serena calls June her friend. That night, Serena finds a gift handmaid kneeling in her foyer. She tells the girl to run. Wharton blocks the door with a gentle no. Serena picks up Noah and walks out anyway. The city tilts. Lydia finds empty beds, and here's the thing she's spent years refusing. Assault is assault. God isn't conscripted by men who steal children. Janine, fresh from another home, whispers, "Help us." Lydia lowers the gun and lets them go. Handmaids peel off into the dark and enter commanders' houses with box cutters. June finds Commander Bell, hears the phone ring about the attacks, and puts steel through his eye. Janine arrives, crying thanks. It isn't catharsis, it's proof the fear can run the other way. Gilead moves fast. 3 gallows. Aunt Phoebe looped first. Lydia dragged up as a scapegoat. June marched to the center and was given the mic. She asked for protection for her friends and names their lives as worthy. The ropes snap tight and grenades arc from the crowd. Snipers drop guardians. Rita reverses June's winch with a single shot. Moira cuts bindings. Luke fights through the smoke. American jets finish the square. Afterward, Tueo corners Serena for flight plans. She finally chooses her son's safety over the club and gives them up. Tuello hands Lawrence an altitude-triggered bomb. Lawrence boards with Wharton, and, at the last second, Nick. From the tarmac, June watches the jet rise and bloom into fire. Earlier, she told Lawrence, "Courage looks good on you." He proves it. Boston wakes, power crews sprint. Mayday draws the next border. Mackenzie, the man with Hannah, is promoted and moves closer. Serena sits in a UN camp with Noah and no passport. Emily surfaces from Bridgeport still fighting. Janine is traded across and collapses into Charlotte's arms. Lydia stands in the road and weeps. Holly tells June to write it down. Words outlast uniforms. Luke flips breakers and talks about New York. June faces west. Hannah is still in Colorado. The city that began this story is free enough for a little girl to draw without asking. And there you have it. The Handmaid's Tale is a lesson in how systems excuse harm, how people bend or break inside them, and how ordinary love keeps dragging the future forward. Which moment hit you hardest, June's first no, Serena's last one, or the instant Boston finally breathed? Tell us in the comments below, and check out the next video for another start-to-finish breakdown in just a few minutes.